I caught my fiancé flirting with my maid of honor, and now he's calling off the wedding unless I agreed to a threesome with her on our wedding night. I'll never forget the moment I walked in on them. My fiancé, Eric, 30M, leaning in a little too close to my maid of honor, Sophie, 28F, his hand brushing hers as they laughed over something that wasn't even funny. We'd been at a small get-together to go over wedding details, but I'd stepped out to take a call. When I came back, the sight of them like that, so comfortable, so familiar, sent a cold chill through me. At first, I tried to ignore it. I convinced myself it was just my mind playing tricks, that I was letting wedding stress make me paranoid. After all, Sophie had been my best friend since college, and Eric was the man I'd planned to spend my life with. But as the night went on, I noticed more. The way he looked at her, the subtle touches, the inside jokes they shared. It was like I was watching something just outside my understanding, an unspoken language between them that left me feeling like an outsider at my own engagement party. When the night finally ended, I couldn't hold back anymore. I pulled Eric aside as soon as the last guest left, my heart pounding with a mix of hurt and anger. "What was going on with you and Sophie tonight?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. He gave me an innocent look, as though I'd just accused him of something ridiculous. "What are you talking about, Mia?" he asked, his tone casual, dismissive. "Sophie and I were just having fun. She's your best friend. I thought you'd be happy we get along." "Getting along is one thing," I replied, my voice tightening. "But the way you were looking at her, touching her, it wasn't just friendly, Eric." He shrugged, as if I were the one making things complicated. "I don't know what you're imagining, but there's nothing going on. Maybe you're just a little jealous." The accusation hit me hard. I'd never felt jealous or insecure about my relationship with Eric. We'd always been close, open, and I'd trusted him completely. But now, standing there, the tension building between us, I didn't recognize the person in front of me. This wasn't the man who'd asked me to marry him, who'd promised we'd build a life together. I shook my head, refusing to let him dismiss my concerns. "This isn't about jealousy. I know what I saw, Eric, and if there's something going on, I'd rather hear it from you." He rolled his eyes as if I were the one being unreasonable, but there was something in his gaze, a flicker of frustration, that only added to my suspicion. "Fine," he said finally, his tone icy. "I'll admit it. I think Sophie's attractive. We talked a few times, and yeah, maybe there's a little chemistry. But that doesn't mean I don't love you." The words cut deep. I'd always believed that I was enough for him, that we were enough for each other. But now he was telling me he had feelings, attractions, whatever he wanted to call them, for my best friend. The betrayal settled heavily in my chest. "So, what now?" I asked, crossing my arms, trying to steady myself. "Are you planning to act on it?" He looked at me for a moment, as if considering his next words carefully. "Not without you," he said finally, his tone strangely calm. "Look, Maya, I love you, but I think this could be an opportunity. I'm only interested in Sophie because I feel something between the three of us. Maybe we could explore it together." I stared at him, stunned. "You're suggesting a threesome? With my best friend? On our wedding night?" He didn't flinch, as though he'd expected my shock, and was already prepared to reason it away. "Why not?" he said, his voice growing more confident. "It could be exciting, something different. We're about to start our lives together, and this could be a way to make that night unforgettable. If you're so worried about Sophie and me, wouldn't this put your fears to rest?" His logic was twisted, a manipulation dressed as a suggestion. I felt like I was looking at a stranger, someone who calculated this moment down to the last detail, waiting for me to react just as he wanted. "I can't believe you'd even suggest that, Eric," I replied, my voice shaking with anger and hurt. "I trusted you. I trusted both of you, and you're using our wedding to test my loyalty." He sighed, rolling his eyes again, as though my feelings were just an inconvenience. "Look, Maya, it's not a big deal. You're blowing this out of proportion. If you really loved me, you'd be open to exploring new things, to having fun with this instead of making it some dramatic ordeal." His words stung, twisting my doubt into self-blame. He was making it sound as if I were the unreasonable one, as if I were standing in the way of some modern, liberated version of our relationship. But I knew, deep down, that this wasn't about freedom or exploration. It was about him pushing my boundaries to see how much I'd bent. I can't believe you'd ruin this for some fantasy, I managed, my voice barely above a whisper. Eric's face hardened. I'm not the one ruining things, Mia. If you're going to cling to outdated ideas about what marriage should look like, then maybe we're not as compatible as I thought. So, if this is a deal breaker for you, say it now. The ultimatum hung in the air between us, heavy and threatening. He was willing to call off the wedding, the life we'd been planning, unless I agreed to his terms. And worse, he was making me feel like I was the one with the problem, like my refusal to share him on our wedding night was somehow a failure to understand him. I took a deep breath, feeling my hands shake as I tried to process what he was saying. So, you're saying that if I don't agree to this, then we're done? He nodded, his gaze steady, emotionless. If you're not willing to try, then yeah. I need someone who trusts me, who's willing to let go of their insecurities. I felt a surge of anger, a realization of just how far he was willing to push, of how much he was willing to sacrifice for a fleeting desire. This wasn't the man I thought I was marrying. This was someone who saw my loyalty, my love, as something to test, something to twist to his advantage. I took a shaky breath, summoning every ounce of strength I had left. Then maybe we are done, Eric. Because I'm not marrying someone who would do this to me, who would make me feel like I'm not enough on the night I'm supposed to feel like everything. He blinked, caught off guard, but the shock quickly turned to irritation. Fine, Mia. If that's how you feel, then maybe we're better off without each other. Without another word, he turned and walked away, leaving me standing there, my engagement ring heavy on my hand, my heart shattered. I stood there in stunned silence long after Eric left, replaying the conversation over and over. I kept telling myself I'd misunderstood, that he'd come back and apologize, that the man I'd fallen in love with would return and tell me this had all been some kind of horrible mistake. But as the minutes ticked by, it became painfully clear. The Eric I thought I knew didn't exist anymore. The next day, I tried to go about my usual routine, hoping that a sense of normalcy might help me make sense of the chaos swirling in my mind. But it was nearly impossible to escape the memories of the night before. Every wedding-related email, every invitation we hadn't yet mailed, felt like a slap in the face. A cruel reminder of how quickly everything had unraveled. I tried to distract myself, but the conversation with Eric echoed in my head, his cold, emotionless tone as he'd laid down his ultimatum. In a moment of desperation, I called Sophie. She was my best friend, after all. Maybe she'd offer some kind of clarity, maybe even confirm that Eric's idea had been all his and that she had no part in it. I needed to believe that she'd been as blindsided as I was. Sophie, I said when she picked up, my voice tight with nerves. We need to talk. Something happened with Eric last night, and I need to understand. There was a pause, just long enough to make me wonder if she'd hung up. But then she replied, her voice cautious. Sure, Mia. What's going on? I took a deep breath, gathering the courage to lay it all out. Eric told me he's attracted to you. He said that if I trusted him, I'd consider a threesome with you. He even said he'd call off the wedding if I didn't agree. Sophie was silent, and the seconds stretched painfully as I waited for her response. Finally, she sighed, her voice barely above a whisper. Maya, I had no idea he'd actually bring it up to you like that. He's mentioned ideas to me before, but I thought he was just joking. I never thought he'd actually go through with it. My heart sank. So he's talked to you about this before, and you didn't think to tell me. She hesitated, and I could hear the discomfort in her voice. I didn't want to upset you, Mia. I thought he'd get over it, that it was just some weird fantasy he was going through. I didn't want to hurt you. The betrayal settled over me like a heavy weight. My best friend, the woman I trusted with every detail of my life, had known about Eric's intentions and had chosen to stay silent. Sophie, how could you keep something like this from me? I asked, my voice shaking. You know how much this wedding means to me, how much Eric meant to me. She sighed again, clearly uncomfortable. Maya, I didn't want to get between you two. I thought, maybe it was something he'd move on from. I never imagined he'd actually give you an ultimatum. My anger simmered just beneath the surface, but I tried to stay calm. Well, he did. And now he's saying he'll call off the wedding unless I agree to this insane idea. Sophie was quiet for a moment, and when she finally spoke, her words felt like another betrayal. Look, Maya, I know this sounds crazy, but maybe he's just trying to add some excitement to things. You and Eric have been together for a while, and maybe he's just, I don't know, feeling restless. A lot of couples try things to keep things fresh. Maybe he's not as serious about it as you think. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My best friend, the woman I trusted more than anyone else, was actually justifying his behavior. Are you seriously defending him right now, Sophie? He's putting our entire relationship on the line for this. He told me, plain as day, that he'd walk away if I didn't agree. She let out a slow breath, sounding like she was trying to carefully measure her response. Maya, I'm not saying he's right. I'm just saying that maybe he's pushing boundaries because he feels comfortable with you. Maybe he thinks this is something you two could explore together, not something that would end things. It was like talking to someone I didn't know. I felt the ground slipping from beneath me, my entire foundation of trust shaken to its core. Sophie, I can't believe you're saying this. I expected you, of all people, to understand how hurtful this is. He's my fiancé, and you're my best friend, and somehow, I feel like I'm the only one fighting for this relationship. She sighed, and when she spoke again, her tone was exasperated. Maya, relationships are complicated. Sometimes it's not just black and white. I'm just saying, if he's open to this, maybe it's worth considering. You're both adults. No one's forcing you to do anything. Her words hit me like a slap. I called her, hoping for comfort and clarity, but instead, she was treating my pain like some kind of abstract relationship issue to be worked through. It felt surreal, like I was having an out-of-body experience, watching as my two closest relationships crumbled before my eyes. Fine, Sophie, I said, struggling to keep the anger and hurt from spilling over. Thanks for your advice. I hung up before she could respond, my hands shaking as I set the phone down. I sat there in stunned silence, feeling like the walls were closing in around me. The two people I trusted most in the world had both betrayed me, both reduced my feelings to some kind of insecurity or possessiveness. They turned my love, my commitment, into something disposable, something they were willing to test for their own amusement. Days went by, and I heard nothing from Eric. No apology, no attempt to make amends. It was as if he'd taken my refusal as the final word, as if I'd somehow failed his test, and he was content to let things end. Sophie, too, remained silent, as if distancing herself would somehow absolve her of the role she played. After a week, I made the painful decision to start canceling wedding plans. It was humiliating reaching out to vendors, explaining that the wedding was no longer happening. I felt like I was walking through a nightmare, dismantling everything I'd spent months, years, really building. Then, out of nowhere, Eric showed up at my apartment, looking as if nothing had happened. He was calm, almost casual, as he explained himself. Maya, I thought you'd take some time to think it over. Maybe see things from a different angle. I wasn't trying to hurt you. I just wanted us to be open to new things. I stared at him, feeling a mix of anger and disbelief. You think I'd just change my mind after everything you said? After you basically told me that I wasn't enough on my own? He shrugged, unbothered. It's not that you're not enough. I just thought it'd be exciting, something we could experience together. But I didn't mean for it to come between us. I felt the last of my patience snap. Eric, you gave me an ultimatum, one that I could never accept. And you think I'd just come around? He finally seemed to realize the gravity of the situation, his expression darkening. So, you're really ending things over this? Over one suggestion? It's not just a suggestion, Eric. It's the fact that you were willing to throw away our relationship over something so selfish. You put your fantasy above everything we built. For the first time, I saw regret in his eyes, but it was too little too late. I thought you'd be more open-minded, he muttered, looking down. Well, maybe you need someone who fits your definition of open-minded, I replied, my voice steady. But that person isn't me. I walked him to the door, the realization settling over me that this was the end. And as he left, I felt an unexpected sense of peace. He'd shown me who he really was, and I was finally free to rebuild, to find someone that respected my boundaries, my worth. In the days that followed, I cut ties with Sophie too. The pain was sharp, but I knew I couldn't keep people in my life who'd betrayed me so deeply. For the first time in years, I was alone, but I felt strangely empowered, knowing that I'd chosen myself over people who had taken me for granted. It was the hardest decision I'd ever made, but I knew it was the right one. And as I began to rebuild, piece by piece, I felt a strength in myself that I hadn't known was there, a resolve to never settle for less than I deserved. The days following my break with Eric and Sophie were a blur of conflicting emotions. Losing both my fiancé and my best friend left a raw emptiness I wasn't sure how to fill. I'd spent so long picturing our wedding day, our future together, Sophie by my side as we built a life with the man I thought I'd grow old with. Now I was suddenly left to untangle years of shared memories, hopes, and dreams that had crumbled overnight. One afternoon, a few weeks later, I found myself sorting through a box of wedding planning notes and sketches, notes I'd scribbled during countless late nights and phone calls with Sophie. It was strange, seeing her handwriting mixed in with my own, a physical reminder of the friendship we'd once shared. A wave of anger surged through me as I remembered how easily she'd brushed off Eric's proposition, even defending it. She twisted loyalty into something I couldn't recognize. I gathered the pages and carefully placed them in a bag to throw out. As I carried them to the trash, a wave of sadness washed over me. It wasn't just about losing Eric or even Sophie. It was about losing two people who I'd thought knew me best. I'd trusted them with everything, and they'd both shown me how little that trust meant. After that, I made a promise to myself. I was done letting people into my life who couldn't respect my boundaries. I would rebuild, and this time I'd be more careful with who I allowed into my inner circle. Determined to move forward, I threw myself into activities that helped me reconnect with myself. I took up painting, went hiking on weekends, and even joined a local book club, finding comfort in the stories that allowed me to escape my own for a while. Slowly, life began to take on a new rhythm, one that didn't center around anyone else's expectations or approval. One evening, while scrolling through social media, I saw a post from one of Eric's friends, a group photo from a weekend getaway. There they were, Eric and Sophie, side by side, smiling as if nothing had happened, as if they hadn't just dismantled everything I'd held sacred. I felt my heart twist, but I reminded myself that they were no longer my problem. Their lives, their choices, they didn't concern me anymore. Still, the sight of them together made me wonder if their connection had gone beyond what either of them had admitted. Had there been something between them all along? It was a question I'd probably never get an answer to, but the sting of betrayal lingered, refusing to fade. In an effort to distract myself, I decided to meet up with some friends from work. I hadn't told them the full story yet, only that the wedding was off, and they'd been respectful enough to avoid probing questions. That night, I let myself relax for the first time in weeks, laughing with people who genuinely cared about me, who didn't treat me like an accessory to their own desires. One of my friends, Leah 31F, pulled me aside at one point, her face serious. "Maya, I know you haven't talked about it much, but if you ever need to vent about everything that happened, I'm here. It doesn't have to be tonight, but whenever you're ready." The kindness in her voice, her willingness to just be there, made me feel understood in a way I hadn't in a long time. I nodded, grateful for her patience. "Thanks, Leah. I think I'm finally getting to a place where I can talk about it. It's been hard, but I'm learning to let go." She squeezed my hand, her smile warm. "And you're stronger for it. They don't deserve you." In the months that followed, Leah became my closest confidant. With her support, I opened up about the betrayal, about the strange blend of grief and relief that came with ending my relationship with Eric and Sophie. She listened without judgment, helping me see that what I'd gone through was more than just a breakup. It was a lesson in self-respect and boundaries. Then, one afternoon, I received a message from Sophie. "Hey, Mia. It's been a while, but I really want to talk. I know I hurt you, and I owe you an explanation. Can we meet up?" Reading her words made my heart race. I'd spent so long processing the pain she caused, working to rebuild my life without her, and here she was, wanting to re-enter my life on her terms. I debated ignoring her, but curiosity, and maybe a lingering need for closure, made me reply. I told her we could meet at a cafe, a neutral space where I could leave easily if things went south. When I arrived, Sophie was already there, looking nervous. She gave me a small, tentative smile as I sat down, but I didn't return it, keeping my expression neutral. "So, you wanted to talk," I said, keeping my tone calm. She fidgeted, looking down at her hands. "Maya, I know I hurt you, and I can't tell you how sorry I am. I was selfish, and I didn't think about what Eric's suggestion would do to you. I thought that maybe if I stayed neutral, I could keep both of you happy. But I see now that it was wrong. I nodded slowly, watching her carefully. And? What do you expect from me, Sophie? She looked up, a flash of regret in her eyes. I don't know. I missed you, Mia. I made a mistake, a huge one, and I didn't realize what I was losing until it was too late. I took a deep breath, choosing my words carefully. Sophie, I loved and trusted you like a sister. But you knew about Eric's intentions, and you didn't tell me. You even defended him, told me I was overreacting, when he knew exactly what he was doing. Her face paled, and she looked down, shame clear in her expression. I know, and I hate myself for it. I wanted to stay in his good graces, and in doing so, I destroyed our friendship. I'll regret that for the rest of my life. Her apology felt genuine, but it wasn't enough to erase the hurt. I appreciate you saying that, but I don't know if I can ever trust you again, Sophie. You didn't just support him. You gaslit me, made me doubt my own feelings. That's not what friends do. Tears filled her eyes, but she nodded. I understand. I don't expect you to forgive me. I just wanted you to know that I'm sorry, and that I miss you. A part of me felt the urge to comfort her, to tell her everything would be okay. But I held back, realizing that I didn't owe her that. She had made her choices, and I was done sacrificing my own well-being to make others feel better. After a long silence, I finally said, I don't hate you, Sophie, but I can't let you back into my life, not after what happened. I've worked too hard to rebuild, and I can't go back to a friendship built on betrayal. She nodded, tears slipping down her cheeks, but she didn't try to argue. I understand. I'm sorry for everything, Mia. I really am. We parted ways that day, and as I walked away, I felt a strange sense of closure. The pain was still there, but it no longer defined me. I was finally free from the weight of her betrayal, from the need to make sense of it. Sophie had made her choices, and I'd made mine. And for the first time, I felt at peace with letting go. In the weeks that followed, I focused even more on myself, my friendships with people like Leah, who'd been there through it all. I had let go of the people who betrayed me, and in doing so, I found myself surrounded by a community of genuine, supportive friends. I was no longer haunted by the betrayal. I was too busy building a life I loved, a life filled with people who valued and respected me. And as I looked forward, I felt the strength I hadn't known was possible. I'd let go of the past, and I was ready to embrace whatever came next, confident in the knowledge that I was enough, exactly as I was. Over the following months, I immersed myself in the life I'd slowly crafted on my own. I began volunteering at a local animal shelter, finding peace in caring for creatures who needed someone. I took up painting again, something I hadn't done since college, and it felt good to reconnect with myself in ways I hadn't allowed for years. Little by little, I was moving past the hurt and betrayal, feeling more and more like the person I was always meant to be. Then one afternoon, I received an unexpected text from Eric. Just seeing his name flash across my screen brought a wave of nausea, but I reminded myself that I was stronger now, that I could handle anything he had to say. His message was short, straightforward. Hey Mia, I know it's been a while, but I'd really like to meet and talk if you're open to it. I have some things I need to say. My immediate reaction was to delete it. I didn't owe him anything, and I certainly wasn't interested in hearing whatever excuses or half-hearted apologies he had prepared. But part of me was curious. Maybe this was his way of admitting fault, of finally understanding the damage he'd caused. After sitting with it for a day, I decided to meet him on my terms. We arranged to meet at a small cafe on the edge of town, a quiet place where I could leave if things took a turn. When I arrived, Eric was already there, looking worn and surprisingly nervous. Maya, he greeted, giving me a tight smile as I sat down. Thank you for meeting me. I didn't know if he'd even respond. I nodded, keeping my expression neutral. I'm here. What did you want to talk about? He took a deep breath, glancing down at his coffee before looking back at me. I know I messed up. I don't think I realized just how much until you actually left. Losing you, losing what we had, it forced me to confront things about myself that I'd been ignoring. I watched him carefully, trying to keep my guard up. Go on. He hesitated, then sighed. I thought I could have it both ways. I thought that by suggesting what I suggested, I was being open-minded and maybe even progressive. But the truth is, I was selfish. I'd hurt you deeply, and I see that now. I see how I let my own wants overshadow the commitment I made to you. His words felt genuine, but I didn't let myself soften. You didn't just hurt me, Eric. You betrayed my trust. You reduced our relationship to something disposable, something you could twist to suit your own desires. He winced, nodding. I know, and I'm sorry. I've spent months trying to figure out how I let it get that far, why I thought it was okay. But none of my reasons matter, not anymore. I just needed to tell you that I know I was wrong. I let his apology hang in the air, watching him struggle to hold my gaze. There was a time when hearing these words might have meant something, might have made me consider forgiving him. But now, sitting across from him, I realized that I didn't need his apology. I had already found closure on my own. Thank you for saying that, I replied calmly. But I've moved on. I don't think about you or what happened every day anymore. I've built a life I'm proud of, and I don't need your validation to move forward. He looked down, nodding slowly. I figured as much. I just wanted you to know that I'm sorry. I wish I hadn't taken you for granted. There was a sadness in his voice, but it didn't sway me. I gave him a small, polite nod, then stood up, ready to leave. Take care of yourself, Eric. I hope you find what you're looking for. As I walked out of the cafe, I felt a sense of finality, a weight lifting that I hadn't realized I was still carrying. Meeting him again, hearing his apology, it confirmed what I'd already known. I'd made the right choice in leaving and choosing myself over a relationship that hadn't respected me. In the days following our meeting, I felt lighter, more at peace. I continued to pour myself into my new life, finding joy in the little things that reminded me of who I was without the shadows of my past. I started hosting weekly dinners with friends, people like Leah, who'd been there for me when I needed support the most. We laughed, shared stories, and celebrated each other's successes. And for the first time in a long time, I felt truly connected to the people around me. Then, one evening, just as I was about to sit down for a movie night at home, I received another message, this time from Sophie. Maya, I know you've probably moved on, but I need to try again. I need you to understand how much I regret what happened. I can't just let our friendship go without trying to fix things. Reading her words stirred up a mix of anger and sadness. I'd made my peace with losing her, with letting go of the betrayal. But here she was, pulling me back into a conversation I'd thought was closed. I debated not responding, but something compelled me to give her a chance. One last chance, to say what she needed to say. We agreed to meet at a nearby park, a place where we'd spent countless afternoons together back in college. When I arrived, Sophie was already there, her face drawn, her expression serious. Maya, she began, her voice trembling slightly. Thank you for meeting me. I know I have no right to ask anything of you, but I need you to know how sorry I am. I've spent so long replaying everything in my head, and I can't believe how badly I messed things up. I nodded, keeping my expression calm. I appreciate that, Sophie. But sorry doesn't erase the fact that you knew what Eric was doing and still chose to keep it from me. She looked down, a tear slipping down her cheek. I know, and I don't expect forgiveness. I miss you, Mia. I thought that maybe if I could make you understand how much I regret it, we could at least try to rebuild something. I took a deep breath, letting her words sink in. Sophie, I've moved forward. I don't hate you, but I also don't think I can let you back into my life, not in the way we were before. You hurt me deeply, and I can't just pretend that didn't happen. She nodded, wiping her tears, her shoulders slumping as she accepted my words. I understand. I just needed you to know that I'm sorry, and that I'll always regret losing you. We sat there in silence for a few moments, the weight of everything unsaid hanging between us. Then, finally, I stood, feeling a sense of peace wash over me. Goodbye, Sophie. I hope you find what you're looking for. I left her sitting on that bench, feeling the final threads of our friendship unravel as I walked away. And though it was painful, it also felt like a release, a closing of a chapter I no longer needed to revisit. In the months that followed, I continued to build my life on my terms, surrounding myself with people who truly cared, who valued me for who I was. And as I looked forward, I realized that letting go of Eric and Sophie had freed me in ways I hadn't anticipated. I was no longer defined by the betrayals I'd endured. I was defined by the strength it had taken to walk away. Life moved on, and so did I, knowing that I've faced the hardest decisions with courage, that I'd chosen myself over people who hadn't deserved my loyalty. And as I embraced my future, I knew that I was exactly where I was meant to be, free to build a life that was entirely my own. With Eric and Sophie behind me, life opened up in ways I hadn't anticipated. I filled my days with new pursuits, attending community events, making friends through the shelter, and even joining a hiking club. My confidence grew not just in myself but in my choices. I'd taken control of my life when it mattered most, and I was proud of the boundaries I'd set and maintained. I was finally living on my terms, free from the weight of those past betrayals. One weekend, as I was packing up after a hike, Lee invited me out for a spontaneous dinner. We found a small, cozy restaurant, and as we sat down, Lee raised a toast. To fresh starts and stronger boundaries, she said with a grin. To choosing ourselves, I replied, clinking my glass with hers. We laughed, sharing stories about our lives, our dreams, and our goals for the future. Somewhere between the laughter and the heartfelt conversations, I realized that these friendships, the people who truly saw and valued me, were what I wanted to invest in from now on. There was no lingering tension, no hidden motives. Just genuine connection and trust. I felt grounded, like I'd finally found my place, and it had nothing to do with a romantic relationship or a single person who'd validated me in the past. Later that night, after Lee dropped me off at home, I opened my phone to find an unexpected message. It was from someone I'd met through the shelter, Ben, 34M, who had recently started volunteering with us. We'd shared a few friendly conversations, and he was kind, compassionate, someone who genuinely loved helping others. Hey Mia, hope you're having a good evening. I just wanted to let you know that a few of us from the shelter are planning a volunteer get-together next week. It'd be great to see you there. I smiled, feeling a flutter of excitement. I replied that I'd love to join and found myself looking forward to it. For the first time in a long time, I felt ready to connect with someone new. It wasn't about filling a void. It was about opening up, seeing what was out there without compromising who I'd become. This was a step forward, a choice made with a heart that had healed. The night of the get-together, I felt a nervous energy, but it was a good kind of nervousness, the sort that comes when you're stepping into something unknown but exciting. Ben greeted me warmly, and as we talked, I found myself laughing freely, enjoying the conversation without second-guessing every word. He was genuine, present, and there was a softness in his gaze that made me feel completely at ease. He didn't ask about my past or pry into things that weren't his business. He was just there, enjoying the moment with me. Over the next few weeks, Ben and I grew closer, our friendship evolving into something more natural and unforced. There were no games, no hidden expectations. Just two people getting to know each other at a pace that felt right. I found myself enjoying his company without the lingering insecurities that had once plagued me. One evening, as we walked by the river, Ben looked at me, his expression serious yet warm. Maya, I don't know what you've been through to get here, but I want you to know that I'm here to support whatever path you're on. You're amazing as you are. Hearing those words felt like a balm to my soul. I didn't need his approval, but knowing that he saw me for who I was, strong, independent, whole, meant more than I could say. It was a reminder of the journey I'd taken to get here, the hard decisions I'd made, and the strength I'd found along the way. In the weeks that followed, Ben and I continued to grow closer, building a foundation that felt solid, rooted in mutual respect and understanding. I didn't rush anything. I let things unfold naturally, allowing myself the time and space to feel truly ready. And for the first time, I felt a deep contentment, a sense of peace that came from within. On a quiet Sunday morning, as I sipped coffee on my balcony, I looked back on the person I'd been before, the woman who'd almost compromised herself to fit into someone else's desires, who'd almost let go of her worth for people who hadn't valued her. But that version of myself was gone, replaced by someone stronger, someone who knew exactly who she was and what she deserved. I thought of Eric and Sophie, of all the time I'd spent mourning those lost relationships, and I realized now that they'd given me a gift. Their betrayal had pushed me to grow, to discover a strength I hadn't known I had. I was grateful for the lessons they'd taught me, not because of what they'd done, but because of how I'd risen from it. As I looked forward, I felt a sense of anticipation for the future, a quiet confidence that whatever came next would be on my terms. I was ready to embrace it fully, knowing that I was more than enough, that I could trust myself to build a life that honored who I truly was. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was exactly where I was meant to be,